Okay, folks, sorry for the delay. Extremely sorry for the delay. We normally begin well on time, but in any case, we're only late by a minute or two. So, but still, we apologize. Thank you very much. It was due to technical glitches. And we've got technical people here. So today we'll put them on the mat and ask them why the technical glitches happen. But it's wonderful to have this webinar on navigating people and business through COVID. Let's see how our businesses have managed through COVID. It seems the markets are flooded with people. There is demand, but the corporates, I don't know how quick they are. So today we'll have a chance to find out. I thank Telenor for giving us the opportunity to participate with them. They've egged us on and helped us. So Irfan Wahab Khan, the CEO of Telenor, I'm extremely grateful to you for coming forward. There should be far more collaboration with the corporates. We don't ask for money, but at least collaborate with us without money. When you ask for money, then everybody runs away because they feel that money is only meant to be spent on Mercedes and good things, not on research. So that's, but we'll deal with that later. But anyways, thanks Telenor. And let me introduce my panel. We've got Irfan Wahab Khan, CEO of Telenor. Thank you, Irfan Saab. Real pleasure to have you here. We've got Mukeem Haq, Chief Commercial and Group Strategy Officer from Ptcl. Again, thank you, Mukeem, for coming. Got Sarwar Ali Khan, CEO of TPL Tracker Limited. Again, thank you, Sarwar Saab. Very glad to have such an honored panel. Taimur Shah Saab, COO of Shifa Foundation, another very important foundation. Everybody knows Shifa. Taimur Saab, welcome. Thank you for coming. We've got Sadia Haroon, Director HR Planning HRSI. Thank you, Sadia, for coming. Great pleasure to have you. Then we've got Khurram Tariq, CEO of KNMs. So let me begin with you, Irfan Saab. Please tell us how our businesses are doing in COVID and how can we come out from COVID without sclerosis, without being totally, our economy was already in sclerosis before COVID came along. Are we going to recover or go back to sclerosis? So, Irfan Saab.
Jay, thank you, sir. Thanks for having me. It's a very pertinent question you're asking, but if you give you a perspective, at least from our business, which is telecom. So in this 90 minutes of our webinar today, if I tell you that our customers are going to be generating 120 million minutes, 15 million SMSs, and 1,200 terabyte of data. That's not just in Pakistan, but across our markets. And Pakistan is a major contributor. So there's a lot happening when it comes to connectivity and smart connectivity, because what we have seen is that even during this pandemic, the need for connectivity, whether it's data, internet, becomes even more evident. In terms of the businesses, so we have seen, obviously, I mean, the first reaction was a bit of shock for all businesses, but now we start seeing recovery across various segments. And we could be a good proxy because our customers, I mean, we have over 46 million customers. They are from all walks of life. All sort of socioeconomic segments. We have seen, and what we observe is that initial couple of months, we have a major optimization. People were obviously very, very uncertain about how things will develop further. So there was there's a optimization of spend across, especially in the SME segment, that become even more evident. Small businesses, especially during the lockdown, were struggling a lot. But for I would say last 2-3 months, we've seen, things are picking up, actually, and then they're very encouraging signs. So I think it's a mixed bag, looking at, how business handled, but us as business as well as corporate, we also, I mean, our first reaction was, how can we protect? How can we protect our employees, first and foremost? How can we protect our customers? And then from a business viewpoint, the second phase was more on preserving, how we preserve what we have, knowing that there's a huge uncertainty, which no one has envisaged. When at the beginning of the year, when we all have our strategy kicks off and ambitions for the year, there's nothing of this sort which was part of the plans. And then fairly quickly, I think we come out to the third phase after making sure that our employees are safe and protected, and then we are able to preserve the business and from a cash flow viewpoint, so that there's no major hit. We start looking at what sort of new opportunities are there. And like I said in the beginning, at least we are blessed in this sector that we see a huge dependency on our services, and new business models have emerged, whether it's e-learning, whether it's e-health, e-commerce, payments. We've seen a good surge in those areas.
Thank you, Irfan Saab. Thank you very much. मेरा ख्याल let's also switch to a little bit of Urdu, क्योंकि हमारे पास कोई foreign participants तो है नहीं. तो मुकीम साहब ये बताइए कि ये सब बात सही है कि हम माशाल्लाह बिल्कुल अच्छे हो रहे हैं, सब ठीक हो रहा है, पर मैं आपको एक छोटी सी बात बताऊं कि हम एक छोटी सी यूनिवर्सिटी है, हमने सोचा यूनिवर्सिटी खोल दे, एंड वी डिस्कवर्ड के बहुत सारे बच्चे जो उनसे हैं, पहले मैंने कहा सॉरी यूनिवर्सिटी, फिर मैंने कहा किसी माँ ने मुझे चिट्ठी भेजी कि यार ये क्यों खोल रहे हो, ज्यादती हो रही है, तो मैंने कहा नहीं खोलते. फिर बच्चों ने कंप्लेन किया हमारे पास इंटरनेट ही नहीं है. अब मुझे बताएं कि हम कैसे तरक्की कर सकते हैं अगर हमारे पास इंटरनेट ही नहीं है. कोविड तो अपनी जगह है, पर हम तो इंटरनेट के मारे हुए हैं. बताइए.
I think that's, I think just alluding to what Irfan simply said, I think from an internet access perspective, we still have a long way to go. So if I look at the broadband penetration within Pakistan, so you're still covering 2.5% of the households today, which should be on a global average, it should be around 20%. If you look at on the mobile side as well, if you look at the 4G penetration, or the numbers are coming out to be very good, but still we are at 50% people with broadband access. So I think there are two fundamental things that come across. The first part of the, as Irfan said, on the resilience side. So I think what I call the first phase is more like resilience, where everybody adapted to the new normal. It was a forced change. So, there was this joke that we have around, who is responsible for your digital transformation? Is it your CTO, your CEO? People say, no, it was COVID. So I think we were all forced into a phase where everything came along, and we did provide a decent levels of connectivity. But what is now happening is that is changing at a pace faster than what the supply chain is geared up to do. So if we have to look at it's not only about investment, by the way, it's also about the way we structure. So if you look at it, the response that I can say very fairly, there are areas where the internet connectivity in Pakistan is very high, but there are areas where the internet connectivity or availability is not at par. If somebody is in a remote area, there are challenges in providing decent bandwidth and connectivity. So while I think telecom is one of those sectors which I'm very proud to be a part of, which has enabled a greater level of connectivity, the proportion is not that significantly high where the access is not available. And what we're doing for that is, I think you guys are aware of the two structural initiatives that the government has embarked upon. So one initiative is, how do we connect all the Ptcl headquarters, enable them for at least a 10G connectivity across Ptcl headquarters. It's delivered through a Universal Services Fund initiative, which is to enable that bandwidth. The second part of that discussion is, how do we make the internet access cheaper? For that, the reforms that need to come in is not only that the operators need to become efficient like us, the other part of that discussion is primarily the right of way. A lot of these cases where funding is made available, the structural flaws in the supply chain need to be derived. But I think the good thing.
Can you explain what you mean by the right of way?
Right of way is when if you have to lay a fiber or a tower in an area, they need to get permissions. So there are in Pakistan normally a 41-step process to go through those permissions. Just as an example.
Steps.
41 steps. If you want to have a digital enablement, you want to make it as rightful as somebody having oxygen, then those changes need to happen. But I think I will give you a more hopeful answer, which is, I think the three initiatives that have already kicked off in that direction. One is on the international capacity for Pakistan submarine cables. That need to go 6 to 8x over the next 3 to 4 years. So there's a lot of emphasis on how do we connect to the outside world, whether it's on the Western route or the African route. The second part of that is Universal Services Fund engaging with the operators on fiberizing Ptcl headquarters, and how do we enable 6 to 8 times more bandwidth immediately on a sustainable basis. The third thing that is coming across is with the new licensing regime that's coming up for fixed line, the right of way is a major subject of discussion, and how do we make it a one window operation. So the only way to do that is over the next 3 to 4 months. It's not only going to be about the operators, but all stakeholders coming together in the value chain. The deployment capacity of, I'll give you an example. The deployment capacity of fiber in Pakistan today is less than 300 to 400,000 a year. I'm talking about covering 20 million households. You can do the math. So the other sector will automatically need to grow alongside is the capacity that we deploy on that. So I think the point is very much there. I think the telecom overall, if you ask me in my perspective, we've been able to deliver. The recent surveys tell the telecoms have been able to sustain the bandwidth requirement. I think we met 82% of the users' requirements. This is a survey that was done by McKinsey in Pakistan. So people did have a satisfactory answer to that. 82% of demand was met on a satisfactory level. 20% of the people had issues and challenges, and that was basically on the geography and the infrastructure limitations, which in my view gives opportunity for not increasing the access, but also enabling the bandwidth. So that's a summary from my side.
Look, I'm not so concerned about remote areas. I mean, people who live in remote areas are enjoying life. They don't need the same access as Lahore and Karachi. So I'm quite cruel about this, that people who live in remote areas, Hunza, they're enjoying their mountains, etc. If they want better internet access, they can come into the city. But what I care about is my students, myself, being able to access things without interruption. So you mentioned two things which are very important. One is Tehsil headquarters. Well, I don't think every Tehsil headquarters should have fiber. Second, that it should be cheaper. But what you forgot about is quantity. So Sarwar Saab, you are, mashallah, a user of internet. Do you find it satisfactory? Is it okay? Or how do you make out with these corporates giving us the internet that they do?
So Nadeem,
Sir,
I've actually stepped in for Sarwar. This is Mohammed Aminuddin. I'm CEO of Ptcl
Okay,
Insurance.
welcome.
Sarwar unfortunately
Welcome.
took sick. So I just sort of, this is life,
No issue.
unexpected things happen. Anyway, I think yes, as a financial services company with a very large retail footprint, we are a user of internet and connectivity. More so because we serve the retail sector more than the corporate sector, and hence our connectivity with our customers and the days of, the snail mail and it's all gone now. So we have to connect via the latest technologies available, which typically means a telecom backbone and connectivity via email, WhatsApp, and whatnot. So actually for us, COVID was actually realization and execution of plans that we had made. Business continuity planning is what it's typically called. And we executed it pretty much to the T, whereby our downtime was nil. And with a very large customer base, about 60,000 customers, we were able to assure them that we were there for their financial needs, in our case, insurance, or for that matter, in our group companies, tracking services, which are pretty much 24/7. And actually it works. So I think one thing about, and I think this is some thanks due to the telecom infrastructure that has developed in the country, is that we are able to connect by and large, most of the time, to a very large segment of our customer base. And it works. So we've had no problem. In fact, in a certain way, as the other panel contributor was suggesting, it's proven the case that all that investment they've done in creating the connectivity, creating digital platforms, creating access through multiple channels, it's all a worthwhile investment. And then on top of it, given consideration for staff, we started working from home. So the fact that we had connectivity available to be able to serve our customers 24/7 remotely, we're kind of grateful in a way, looking at the positive side of the equation, for being able to validate these concepts and actually implement them for pretty much good customer satisfaction.
Okay. Thank you very much. Taimur Saab, you are a net beneficiary of COVID, right? Because obviously healthcare costs have gone up. So you, mashallah, are doing well. What's your take on the whole COVID business? Is it going away? Is it not going away? And how have healthcare service providers responded to COVID? Because I still find that we're continuing the old way. Are you going to use more technology? Are you going to develop more in terms of providing us better healthcare through technology?
Thank you very much. And yes, this is a common perception that healthcare is a beneficiary of COVID. And we were hoping the same because generally it is said that healthcare is a recession-proof business. Yeah. But we learned it the hard way that it is recession-proof, but not a pandemic-proof business. So when the COVID struck, although there was a lot of demand for COVID treatment patients in the hospital, but there was also a lot of fear among people coming into the hospitals because they thought that hospitals are probably the hotbed of infections. So a lot of our elective surgeries and so many things that revolve in healthcare industry, they were stopped. And then since it was all about health, so the changing scenario every day kept us on our toes. The biggest challenge that we had before I come to the technology part was our healthcare workers, because it becomes a very conflicting situation to be in where your family wants you to remain safe inside your house, but your duty calls for going into the area where the treatment happens for such patients. So that required a lot of staff engagement, getting them motivated, reminding them of the oaths that they have taken while joining the profession and all those sorts of things. So financially, we did suffer. Yes, we probably went down to 50% of our operational capacity. And healthcare being a very low margin, it means that we went into red straight away. But it was our board of directors and the leadership who wanted us to focus on the healthcare delivery. Second thing that you asked us about the digital transformation, we were working on utilizing the digital means for expanding the footprint. But like it was mentioned earlier on, COVID accelerated that multiple times. So on the eve of, I believe, 24th of March, when the lockdown orders came in, one of the order was that outpatient services are to be suspended everywhere. So we could not leave our patients who were scheduled, who were going to come in. So straight away, we moved onto a digital platform. We could give them access, and we almost reached 50% of our normal clinical visits using our virtual platforms. Of course, with the start of the clinics again, that number started to go down. But even when the operations have gone back to a routine and normal, we're still on an approximately 10% of our patients are still using our virtual platform. And as part of lesson learned from this pandemic so far, we are pushing further into our digital transformation strategy by expanding the virtual hospital concept all over the country. And the last part that you said, कि COVID है कि नहीं है, कम हो रहा है, ज़्यादा हो रहा है. So we have seen a steady decline, but there are small blips here and there where there is an increase, but then it goes down. But thanks to God, thanks to Almighty Allah, it's not the situation that we faced after Eid al-Fitr.
Okay, great. Sadia Bibi, how is COVID going to transform HR? People are hurting, people can't get jobs. How is it going to change HR? And are our corporates going to understand the change that's happening? Sadia is there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
So, very interesting change है, मुश्किल भी है. I don't call it a new normal, I call it a better normal. अगर हम new का word इस्तेमाल करते रहेंगे ना, तो कभी हम जो अब जिंदगी दुनिया सब बदल गई है, हमें इसकी आदत नहीं होगी. कॉर्पोरेट्स कैसे रिएक्ट कर रही हैं? उनसे एक कंपनी के चेयरमैन ने फोन करके पूछा कि आप वाला सवाल पूछा. उनकी कंपनी was not and is not impacted. तो मैंने उनको जवाब दिया कि आपका ज़मीर इजाज़त देता है कि आप सिर्फ कोविड का फायदा उठा के लोगों को रिडंडेंट करते हैं तो जरूर कर दीजिए. Companies are doing, there are a lot of companies who are very sympathetic, there are a lot of companies who are using this to say, okay, let's cut down the salaries. My personal opinion, companies for this year need to stop looking at the bottom line. They need to look at the employees who have brought them where they are today. बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग एक और चीज हुई है, हमें पता है बैकलॉग है. बहुत ज़्यादा एम्प्लॉयमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटी अचानक से मार्केट में आई है। बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग मार्केट काम आया है, जिसमें सबसे ज़्यादा काम आईटी के हवाले से आया है, ई कॉमर्स के हवाले से आया है। बहुत काम इसलिए भी आया है क्योंकि इंडिया के लॉकडाउन की वजह से जो उनकी बीपीओ सर्विस हैं वो बहुत कंपनीज बंद हुई हैं। हम हमेशा की तरह इल प्रिपेयर्ड हैं, हम हमेशा की तरह टैलेंट लैक करते हैं, हम हमेशा की तरह सिर्फ वो चीजें करते हैं जो अभी हमारे सामने हो, जो हमारी कॉर्पोरेट्स कर रही हैं। I had a meeting this morning with a very senior banker, and I said, you know, after working for 26 years, I think it's my responsibility to tell you we are not developing leaders, we are developing workers. बहुत कम कंपनीज हैं जो एक्चुअली अपने एम्प्लॉयज पे इन्वेस्ट करती हैं, और इस पेंडेमिक को हमें लेसन लर्न समझना चाहिए कि दुनिया सिर्फ जनरल मैनेजर्स जो पुराने हैं उनसे नहीं चलती है. We need to work on our workforce. The Naya Pakistan is not helping us. CPAC is not going to bring us business. CPAC, Naya Pakistan is only going to produce mediocre talent, and pandemic has made it very clear. I have all the CEOs in this platform, जिन सबसे मिलने के लिए मुझे शायद बहुत दफा अपॉइंटमेंट लेनी पड़े. मेरी ऑब्जर्वेशन, एंड आई वांट एवरीबडी टू लुक इनटू इट एंड मेक अ कमेंट. देखिए, 4 तरह के एम्प्लॉयज होते हैं कंपनीज में. परफॉर्मर्स, देन दे आर राइडर्स हु राइड ऑन परफॉर्मर्स शोल्डर्स, देन दे आर पॉलिटिशियंस, एंड देन वी हैव साइलेंट वर्कर्स, जिनको वो जो बीबा बच्चा होता है ना घर के अंदर, जो सारे काम कर रहा होता है तो अम्मी अब्बू भी प्यार करते हैं और भूल जाते हैं. इस पेंडेमिक ने जो आपके परफॉर्मर्स थे, दे आउट परफॉर्म. जो राइडर्स थे, दे आइदर हैड टू वर्क or they became very visible. Politicians have no chance because of cigarette break नहीं है, नमाज की ब्रेक नहीं है, लंच पे नहीं जा सकते, बॉस के घर का बिल नहीं पे कर सकते, and the silent workers stood out. So that is something which is very evident. I want to know what are corporates doing about people who are, and it's not about being, you know, cruel. It's about workforce management, because ये नया जो तरीका आया है, इसमें तमाम workforce नए तरीके से काम करेगी. Are we ready for that? Have we thought about it? We're talking about broadband, we're talking about internet, but do we realize कि ये हम खवाइश की बात, खास लोगों की बात कर रहे हैं. हमारे पास एक पूरा, और जो हमारी 70% पॉपुलेशन है. आपने नदीम साहब आपने बात की अपने स्टूडेंट्स की. मैं स्टूडेंट्स की बात करती हूँ, कॉलेज गोइंग की नहीं, जो बच्चे स्कूल जाते हैं. वो बच्चे जो 2000 रुपए की फीस वाले स्कूल में जाते हैं, उनके घर में लैपटॉप नहीं है, उनके घर में एंड्रॉइड फोन उनके बाप के पास है, 3 बच्चों के पास नहीं है. अफ्रीका में पेंडेमिक शुरू होते ही एक मुल्क ने सारी तालीम रेडियो पे देनी शुरू कर दी. इज पीटीसीएल थिंकिंग अबाउट इट? दे आर आवर नेशनल कैरियर. सो यू नो, लेट्स टॉक अबाउट 22 करोड़ अवाम. लेट्स नॉट टारगेट 50 लाख लोग जो कि हम हैं.
Yeah, let me bring in Khurram Tariq Sahab. Khurram Tariq Sahab, you are from a very interesting company, a traditional cotton company, a well-known family, and you have branched off into kind of a derivative of that. You will explain that to us. But more importantly, you are probably the only company in Pakistan that I see on your website. You have R&D and HR, which no company seems to have. So that's very interesting. So, okay, it shows me that you are visionary. But can you please tell us how you're going to benefit from COVID, and how you're going to go online, and how you're going to take advantage of the new technology? Or is it still going to be the same old Tana Bana in Faisalabad?
Assalamu alaikum ji. I am from value-added textile manufacturing, clothing, direct shelf product. So let me sail you through what happened. First thing was COVID in China. We thought it's going to stay in China and our supply chains are going to be disrupted. So there was a hyper buying of the raw materials, and that's way back January. And then came the customer disruption, the hold where it is, cancel, block, blah, blah, blah. And in the meantime, there were customers who were silent, who were not responding, who were not saying, don't do it. So we were kind of hanging. Our response was, first of all, the most difficult thing was to get the factories approved for running. And that was a big challenge because the district management and everybody tried, no congregation of people. So we had to set up a hospital. We had to set up we had stockpile of oxygen cylinders and supplying everything to our labor force who went ill. And then, interestingly, we got alternate productions like masks, like PPEs. So we had to convert very quickly into those new lines of business and start producing it, which we never produced before. And in the meantime, the State Bank was very agile. They were rolling out policies, very, very conducive policies, literally on a daily basis. And that helped us float through the cash flow issues. And now there's an interesting situation. The interesting situation is that there's a lot of export orders coming into our business. Main reason is India has shortage of labor. And Bangladesh had a lot of canceled orders and they have cash flow issues. And we are the only country in the region which are geared up for not being visited by customers and still able to produce. So for us, so far, it's a blessing in disguise. We don't have capacities to handle, and that's where we are. I can't listen to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me return to Mr. Irfan Saab. Irfan Saab, ये तो सब बातें सही है, but let's move on a little bit. I will show you a chart just now, which I find absolutely interesting, and I show in every webinar. वो chart ये है. एक मिनट में आपको दिखा देता हूँ, ठीक है जी? ये चार्ट है जी. हमारी इन्वेस्टमेंट रेट इरफान साहब गिर रही है. पहले ही लो थी. बांग्लादेश, इंडिया वगैरह देखें कहाँ है. हमारी इन्वेस्टमेंट रेट 13% पे पहुंच गई है. 13% of GDP, as you all know, you are business people, माशाल्लाह, is not even replacement rate. ठीक है जी. इसके साथ नीचे आ जाए, हमारी ग्रोथ रेट भी गिर रही है. हमारी ग्रोथ रेट पिछले 20-30 साल से गिर रही है. कोविड ने नहीं गिराई, हमारी कोविड गिर रही है. ये नीचे देखें हैं आपकी जो लाइन, स्ट्रेट लाइन जा रही है. मसला ये इरफान साहब, if we are going to return to normal as you know, अपना ये क्या कहते हैं, सादिया बीबी said very well, are we going to return to the old normal, the new normal, or a good normal? What is it that should be done, Irfan Saab, for us to get to, we did this calculation, the PID some while ago, and we did this in the Planning Commission too. If you're going to go forward without social stress, because we've got a demographic problem on our hands, our population is very young. We need to grow at 7-8%. That means our investment rate must go to 25-30%. Now, can you guys tell me, how can we do that? If you were advising the government, let's say, we're going to do something for the government now. If you were going to advise the government, what would you recommend? What should be done? How do we recover from COVID well, not neurotically?
I think it's a very good question. And in my view, I think we have a fantastic opportunity to respond back actually. And COVID ने शायद थोड़ा सा इसको ज़्यादा highlight कर दिया. I'll build on what you're saying. एक तो you know, when look at our demographic, obviously we have a lot of young people. And all of these people need some sort of employment or, you know, opportunities to work or to set up their own businesses. And एक चीज जो काफी clear नजर आ रही है और जो कि I think it was writing on the wall, लेकिन बहुत से लोग, I mean, we were reluctant as a society is to adopt technology. और मेरे ख्याल में अब there's no better opportunity than today to make sure that we take an ambition कि हमने किस सिम्त में जाना है. We all talk about exports and then we end up in very traditional sectors. So we need to be very strategic in terms of setting our priorities. देखिए आप एक अगर छोटा बिजनेस भी रन कर रहे हैं, आप एक अपनी स्ट्रेटजी बनाते हैं, आप एक विजन बनाते हैं, you set some goals आज के लिए, अगले 5 साल के लिए, you track those goals on a quarterly basis and say कि क्या adjustments की जरूरत है. What we are missing is a national strategy for the country. और मेरे ख्याल में जो सबसे बड़ी अपॉर्चुनिटी है वो एक नॉलेज इकोनॉमी की तरफ जाने की अपॉर्चुनिटी है. At the back of this digitization, at the back of technology revolution, fourth industrial revolution and all those things which are happening, and we need a comprehensive plan कि कैसे हम अपने जैसे पहले सादिया ने भी हाईलाइट किया कि बच्चों को कैसे हम इक्विप करें, not towards traditional skills, but we need to really guide them towards what is in demand in future, tomorrow, keeping in mind, we would like to go in there. We need to, और मेरे ख्याल में ये बहुत मुश्किल नहीं है because we have very talented workforce. अगर हम अपने बच्चों को देखते हैं, they wanted to learn, they wanted to work hard. उनमें आगे बढ़ने की जस्तजू भी है, तमन्ना भी है, and वो काम भी करना चाहते हैं. जिस चीज की कमी है उसमें सबसे बड़ा तो mentoring and guiding जो हमें करने की जरूरत है. The mass scale, again I'm not talking about selected few, but I'm talking about masses. And investment or funding की जो है आपने भी बात की. But if we have that plan in place, we can say okay, what are the skill sets, how we need to sort of start producing at the bottom. And एक और trend जो मैं reinforce करता जाऊँ, I think is very important for all the audience to know. We have also seen tremendous opportunities पिछले 3-4 महीने में in the IT business, BPO business, in some of the call center and IT services. Again, at the back of के Philippines बंद था COVID की वजह से, India बंद था, and few other markets they had a harder hit and a shutdown. और वो business हमारी तरफ आया और बहुत सी companies ने फायदा उठाया. It's good, but obviously we can do a lot more and we can sustain this. And then we have to also look at what are some of the roadblocks जिसकी वजह से हमारा investment बढ़ नहीं रही है. What sort of conducive environment हमें चाहिए. Ease of doing business is one indicator. इस पे काफी बात भी हुई, गवर्नमेंट ने भी क्लेम किया, but on ground अगर आप देखते हैं तो things have not changed. We see that there is still a lot of red tapeism, bureaucratic hurdles हैं. The provincial and the federal government and authorities are not aligned on many of those things. So even अगर आप एक छोटा even technology में business आपने establish करना है, right from the company registration to sending money overseas, we have huge issues और हमें इसको resolve करना होगा. इसके अलावा आपने एक और रिस्पॉन्स की बात की एंड मेरे पैनल के कोलीग्स ने भी कि कोविड में जो बाकी मुल्कों का रिस्पॉन्स रहा है, एंड वी हैव सीन सम ग्रेट एग्जांपल्स. मैं आपको एक फंडामेंटल एग्जांपल अपने सेक्टर से देखता हूँ. तकरीबन हमने 25 से 30 ममालिक देखे जिन्होंने स्पेक्ट्रम जो कि एयरवेव्स हैं, which is a national asset, they have made sure that there is more spectrum being available for the operators to address the increased demand. जो आपने बात की बिल्कुल बजा है in terms of the quality of service even urban, and I'm also not talking about rural, but हम कैसे urban areas में in government के point of view it was just a one policy directive because those airwaves are there. They are not being utilized today. हमने उसको संभाल के रखा हुआ है for future day के जी हम उसको scarcity create करेंगे और हम bid करेंगे और हम शायद किसी दिन इसके ऊपर we can get some money out of it. And we are not utilizing it. It's a waste opportunity. It's like a melting ice business कि आपने वो रख दिया, वो block पिघलता जा रहा है and it's just gone basically. So I think थोड़ी सी हमें and fight के platform से I think what we can do as collectively, because किसी एक company या किसी एक sector या segment से expect करना कि वो they will come up with all the answers. But fight के through we can come up with certain recommendations which should take us to the to where you are alluding towards. हम कैसे investment बढ़ा सकते हैं, कैसे we can have a strategic prioritization for the country and then set some goals which will help us moving in that direction.
I think fascinating. No, absolutely. We are trying to do that. By the way, in PIDE, we are also trying to do that. We've developed a growth framework, which we are going to involve a large number of very good economists, the best economists in the country, and they're going to collaborate to make a growth framework, which we'll present to you in a few days. We would love for the corporates to join us in this too, and just come and help us think through things. But, let me now throw the questions at panel, and whoever wants to take them can take them very simply. First thing, Irfan Sahab, why is the quality of internet? I see what Mukim is saying about the right of way. I see what you're saying about pricing the internet or auctioning the internet, spectrum, about being stingy about the spectrum. So how is it that we can get our digital policy right? After all, whenever we see कि कोई commission बनी है, तो उस पे आप ही लोग होते हैं. You are the people who are sitting at the table. हम लोग तो नहीं, हम लोगों को तो बिठाते भी नहीं है वो. So what goes wrong? Why can't you influence policy? Why is it that our policy is so neurotic and strange? जैसे कि मैं easy पैसा में पैसे डालने की कोशिश कर रहा था और डलता ही नहीं है. It's so difficult to put money into. You have to physically go and put money in easy पैसा. अगर physically डालना तो फिर फायदा क्या रहेगा भाई? अगर मैं बैंक अकाउंट से ट्रांसफर नहीं कर सकता तो फायदा क्या? फिर शोर मचाते हैं डॉक्यूमेंटेशन का, फिर समझ नहीं आती, फिर इंटरनेट जूम कॉल के बीच में बंद हो जाता है. तो भाई करें क्या? हम कैसे दुनिया में compete करेंगे?
एक तो हमें थोड़ा सा पीछे जाके फंडामेंटली देखना पड़ेगा कि what are we missing? So I think what we are missing is, और जो it's linked to the overall business environment, is linked to the investment. अगर आप देखें telecom sector में historically FDI के point of view से भी telecom sector was able to attract a lot of investment. आज से 10 साल पहले, 12 साल पहले जब ये पूरी deregulation शुरू हुई, but पिछले कई सालों से ये phenomena जो है वो रुक सा गया है. और उसकी वजह ये है कि we don't have clarity in terms of the policy. आज अगर मैं आपको ये बताऊं कि 4 में से 3 आपके जो players हैं जो in the telecom space, they are against the regulator in court on the license renewal, जो कि 2004 का license है, and government could not come up in time as per their own contractual obligation जो उनको देनी थी कि clarity दें investors को कि आपने renew कैसे. So there are some irritants which are hampering the growth and the further investment. और आपने जो बाकी मवालिक रीजन की बात की, I see personally because I sit on boards on those companies in those countries, investment is being diverted there because of the non-conducive environment. So fundamentally that's the issue which needs to be solved. और वो होगा तो फिर digital backbone जो मुल्क के लिए बहुत जरूरी है, उसमें investment भी आएगी because operators का या investors का interest होगा उसके अंदर, and so we need to really address those fundamental issues. जहाँ तक आपका दूसरा सवाल easy पैसा का ताल्लुक है, I just want to clarify that as well. कि now, I mean, there are a lot of even I think State Bank ने एक अच्छी चीज COVID में की, they have removed all the charges related to IBFT. So you can actually link it with any of your bank account and digitally send money into your wallet, whether वो Jazz Cash or Easy Paisa हो. And we have seen a tremendous growth, double digit के अंदर month on month growth हो रही है वो people who are keeping money and sending money through wallets. So it's a beginning of a digital payment ecosystem, which is very encouraging.
Well, I've been trying for weeks and then gave up finally. So Mukim,
I like to add something.
Please
like
go ahead.
Something if you allow me.
Go ahead.
I think coming back to
just don't blame me, otherwise the rest is okay. Just don't blame me.
That's my fault. No, I'm not blaming. So I think the point. I think there are two fundamental issues that are at the helm of any policy making. One is how do we go about decision making as a country? So if you talk about the growth rate or whatever, spectrum ki auction le lein, we can talk about all those things. But I think the fundamental flaw that lies in my view, is two areas. One is the decision making process as a whole. We normally focus on outcomes rather than focusing on the inputs. So if you're going to, so what we're saying is कि हमें outcomes पे हम deliver कर लेते हैं, spectrum के outcomes बड़े अच्छे हमें चाहिए होते हैं, but when we talk about the inputs, we are not really concerned about the inputs that go in. So I think that's the one big gap in how we decide about things. So I think the second part of that discussion that comes across is, I think what Sadia was also alluding to, was domestic productivity. So you can have the most expensive technologies in the world, but they are all linked to productivity. They're all linked to people affording them. So I think the fundamental question at our hand is domestic productivity. CPEC की आपने बात की कि CPEC से growth नहीं आएगी. Exactly. It is all about domestic productivity. So I think the two things at the helm of every single question that we answer, whether it's telecom, whether it's construction, whether it's property, I think the framework is overall how we govern the whole process. So I think if there's anything at the PIDE platform, I'm glad to hear you working on a growth strategy. We'll be happy to contribute the way we can. But I think the fundamental question is at the heart of the decision-making process. So I think that's something that I always talk about. even in our corporate world, even in our, so that's affair needs to be addressed holistically. Otherwise, we'll keep on having the same problem over and over again.
But if I was to ask you, Mukim, very simply, what are the three things that you need for us to have a digital revolution in the country? You know, everybody talks about it. कि अब हम अमीर हो जाएंगे, Google कर लेंगे, हम ये कर लेंगे. अब एक नई चीज आ गई है. Please tell me. There are tech companies that are asking for protection. They want to become the car companies of the future. We will produce a certain kind of phone and not allow Apple in. I'm tied to Apple. I love my Apple, and I don't want to have to buy a second-rate phone just because my Apple is banned. Same thing on many other things. They're saying, for example, okay, ban Amazon. They won't let Amazon come in. I'd love for Amazon to come in, right? So how do we handle this? I mean, is it always about you corporates getting protection, or are you willing to operate in a competitive environment?
So I think it's not at all about protection. So I don't. So on the digital side, if you look at it, so if you look at the revenue split between telecoms and, so where did the Googles and Facebooks came across? They actually came over the top from the telecom world. So the world is no longer about protection. I don't think any corporate that wants to look at protection is not going to be there in the long run, because that is resistance to change, and I think that does not sustain. So I think that's not the case. But I think particularly in the case of Pakistan, if you ask me, what do we need to do about the digital revolution that we need to bring in? I think I think to me at the helm of it is, as I think already alluded to, the spectrum availability. I think what we cannot do as a government or as a country is to hoard ourselves. So just because we want a per dollar price I think we need to get across that spectrum as an enabler. Technology is an enabler. So I think we always focus on digital from a technology perspective. So very good. So I think the enablers are get the stakeholders, get a better decision making, get the policy clear, and enable the people to come and invest and allow an open access, unbundle a lot of the infrastructure. So I think that to me is very simple. But I think the second aspect of it, which is overall the culture, the use, as I come back to the people itself. So I think it will not happen unless there is demand. Because if there is excessive demand for a particular segment, so abhi Pakistan mein cloud, for example, ya BPO ki humne baat ki. So I think what needs to enable is those particular inputs that will derive the digital agenda. It's not the other way around. So I think abhi COVID ne prove kiya hai. So you know the need is mother of all inventions, and I think it's proven itself. Pakistan could not have got the e-commerce boom that we saw over the last 4 months. The Raz, for example, if you look at the sales, it would not have happened. So we were forced into that change. So I think to me, it's not only about policy or corporate driving it. So I think it's about all stakeholders and also about the demand side of it. So I think for digital revolution, so while you can be a lot of focus on the policy side and operators, I think that's fine. But I think on the other side, it is the people and the skill that derives digital. Because if you're still going to produce a lot more labor than people who can deal with technology, you will not be going into a digital revolution at all. And then you'll be importing digital revolutions. So I think it has to be indigenous. And for that, the policy has to focus on the inputs, not on the outputs. That's my
ये खुरम साहब अभी इन्होंने बड़ी अच्छी बात की जो म्यूजिक इकोनॉमिस्ट यस हम लोग तो बड़े खुश होते हैं कि बात सुन के तो शायद इन्होंने जान के मेरे लिए की है कि प्रोडक्टिविटी इज इम्पोर्टेंट है कि प्रोडक्टिविटी इज इम्पोर्टेंट तो खुरम साहब आपसे मैं ये पूछना चाहता हूँ कि यस प्रोडक्टिविटी इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बट अभी इरफान साहब ऑल्सो मेंशन समथिंग अबाउट कि जी वी वर लकी आपने भी कहा था कि जी बांग्लादेश इज नॉट रेडी ये नहीं तो हमें कुछ ऑर्डर्स ज़्यादा मिल गए हैं तो मैंने टेक्सटाइल में बड़ी दफ़ा देखा है कि बूम आता है तो सेठ हमारे जो हैं वो 2-3 मर्सिडीज पोर्शेस नहीं खरीद लेते हैं जब बस्ट आता है तो वो बैठ जाती है क्या चक्कर है कांट यू गाइस प्लान योर बिजनेस एंड व्हाट अबाउट प्रोडक्टिविटी इन द टेक्सटाइल सेक्टर हमने जो मेजर किया आपकी प्रोडक्टिविटी बहुत लो रहती है तो क्या वजह है कांट वी फिक्स योर सेक्टर एज वेल ये कोविड ने आपको कोई जगाया नहीं है
कोविड ने जगाया जी आई थिंक द गुड कंपनीज ऑलरेडी हैव दे आर ऑपरेटिंग ऑन गुड प्रोडक्टिविटी बट देयर इज अ न्यू चैलेंज ड्यू टू कोविड कस्टमर की जो डिमांड है ना जी वो बड़ी इरेटिक हो गई है सो वी नीड टू हैव मोर कैपेसिटीज एट हैंड एंड वो जो एकदम नी जर्क रिएक्शन से देयर आर क्विकर ऑर्डर्स एंड द विजिबिलिटी हैज लोड so we need to have higher capacities and average capacity utilization might be lower at the end of the year so that's a new norm that's a tough norm but इसमें दो तीन चीजें हैं जी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एक तो नेशनल प्रायोरिटीज का इशू है जी वो नेशनल प्रायोरिटीज हमारी सेटल नहीं होती जो गाइडलाइंस हो टू ऑल आवर पॉलिसीज कि जी हमने करना क्या तो एक तो ये मसला है। दूसरा इशू ये है कि रेसिप्रोसिटी ऑफ FTAs एंड CPAC। अब CPAC में कोई रेसिप्रोसिटी नहीं है। चाइनीज आते हैं, वो चाइनीज अपने पेज और अपनी छतें भी वहां से लेकर आते हैं, यहाँ पर आकर वो फैक्ट्री लगाते हैं, उसमें चाइनीज काम करते हैं, उसमें सिर्फ चौकीदार और लेबर हमारी होती है। सो वी आर नॉट द नेट बेनिफिशरीज, उसमें रेसिप्रोसिटी नहीं है। थर्ड थिंग इज कि रॉ मटेरियल अवेलेबिलिटी जो है उस पर डिफरेंट इंटरेस्ट ग्रुप्स, सो ये नेशनल प्रायोरिटीज इंटरेस्ट ग्रुप्स के मुताबिक डिफाइन करनी जरूरी है कि जी इफ दिस हैपेंस who takes the priority. Their conflict of interest हमेशा different groups में रहेगा, but if we chalk out a policy, तो अब रॉ मटेरियल्स पे ड्यूटीज लगा देते हैं, उसको फिर हटा देते हैं, सो ये इरेटिक है। हाउएवर हमारे सेक्टर में इन्वेस्टमेंट बहुत हो रही है, और जैसा कि एक दोस्त ने मेंशन किया कि हम वी आर मोर फोकस्ड ऑन द ट्रेडिशनल सेक्टर्स, we are only just around 1% of the total textile and clothing in the world, so just nothing. तो there is a huge potential, और वो जब तक ये पॉलिसी अलाइनमेंट ठीक नहीं होगी ये इसी तरह रहेगा।
Okay, fair enough. But let me ask you, जी, I'll just come to you. Let me ask you, खुरम साहब, I mean, क्या ये भी बड़ा मैं पुराना देख रहा हूँ, I'm sort of getting older, unfortunately, कि this constant blaming, corporate sector government को blame करता है, government corporate sector को blame करता है. Yet when I remember, I used to live in the States for a long time, and I remember कि Steve Jobs and Bill Gates never went to Washington. मेरा ख्याल स्टीव जॉब्स एक दफ़ा गया था मरने से पहले, बिल गेट्स शायद एक दो दफ़ा गया कोई खाने शाने पे, बट दे नेवर गो टू वॉशिंगटन. मेरा एक दोस्त है बड़ा अच्छा, जो अगेन ही इज अ बिग गुरु इन सिलिकॉन वैली, अतीक रजा. तो अतीक से मैं फ़ोन पे बात कर, मैं कहा यार तू वॉशिंगटन आ जा, अच्छा खासा अमीर आदमी. कहता है कि मैंने क्या करना है वॉशिंगटन आके. तो मतलब दे आर नॉट लुकिंग टू द गवर्नमेंट. व्हाई आर आवर बिजनेस ऑलवेज लुकिंग टू द गवर्नमेंट?
वो जी जो टीज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस है ना, उसको ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस में कन्वर्ट कर रहे हैं. देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ टीज and there is a lot of uncertainty. They put in a system and that system doesn't work. तो issues जो है ना, वो हम जो नए issues road blocks को हटाने के लिए we have to be some part of us has to be in
Okay.
Islamabad.
Fair
अगर
enough.
ये ना हो तो उसकी जरूरत नहीं है.
ठीक है.
We don't need
Sadia
them.
baby, ठीक. Sadia baby, let me come to you. I think, quite frankly, मैं जब अपने students से बात करता हूँ, my students also have no work habits. In a society, in a culture, I think ambition, hard work is kind of dead. Do you agree with me or not? Is COVID going to wake us up or not?
Nadeem, I'll answer your question later. और खुरम साहब बहुत सारी माजरत के साथ, सबसे पहले मैं फैसलाबाद में थी 1 साल पहले और इंटरव्यू कर रही थी. मैंने 300 बच्चों का इंटरव्यू किया. जब भी नया प्रोजेक्ट होता है मैं खुद लीड करती हूँ. अब मुझे बहुत अफसोस हुआ, एक पोजीशन के लिए मेरे पास 50 बच्चा था. मुझे टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री को बहुत करीब से देखने का मौका मिला, खुशी भी बहुत हुई. 12 यूनिट लगे हुए, 8 यूनिट लगे हुए, छोटे से छोटे बंदे ने भी यूनिट लगाया हुआ है. लेकिन सवाए 1-2 कंपनीज के कोई किसी भी इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट ने ये नहीं सोचा कि भाई ये जो बच्चे लाहौर जाके पढ़ के आ रहे हैं, जो ये सब पढ़ाइयाँ कर रहे हैं, इनके लिए नौकरियां नहीं है, क्योंकि इंडस्ट्रीज आप लोगों ने इनको ट्रेन नहीं किया. और जो नदीम साहब की बात है, मैं उससे एग्री करती हूँ. पावर आपके हाथ में, हुकूमत के हाथ में नहीं है. अगर सियालकोट में बैठ के चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स एयरपोर्ट बना सकती है और अपनी एयरलाइन ला सकती है, आप तो उनके बराबर खड़े हैं. आप क्यों देख रहे हैं हुकूमत को? हुकूमत को टैक्स हम देते हैं, हुकूमत के साथ हम बताएंगे उनको काम कैसे करना है, लेकिन उससे पहले आपको काम करना पड़ेगा. आप अपनी इतनी बड़ी यूथ को क्यों बेकार छोड़ रहे हैं? आप क्यों नहीं कहते इस कॉलेज का 100 बच्चा मैं उठाऊंगा, वो सिर्फ ये काम करेगा? आप स्पेशलाइज लोग क्यों नहीं लेते? आप क्यों आज भी मिनिमम सैलरी के ऊपर उनसे काम कराते हैं? ये जिम्मेदारी है. मैं जिस एंड पे हूँ, आई एम सॉरी, मैं हर पिक्चर देखती हूँ. मैं 26 साल में 20,000 से ज्यादा इंटरव्यू कर चुकी हूँ. So as Nadeem said, the going is good. Like a zamindar, go, let's buy the new Porsche. No, please don't buy a new Porsche. Buy a new Civic and put rest of the money in an institution to gear up. हम अपनी अगली जनरेशन के लिए कुछ नहीं कर रहे. ये हम सबको याद रखना चाहिए. नदीम साहब, आपके सवाल का जवाब आप बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं. मैं इस वक्त दराज के लिए, जो मुकीम ने भी कहा, 11/11 की सेल जब आती है, ये अली बाबा की ग्लोबली सबसे बड़ी सेल होती है। हम इसके लिए जून से काम शुरू करते हैं। मुझे अगले 8 दिन 2000 लोग दराज को देने हैं। 2000 लोग देने का मतलब ये है कम से कम मेरे पास 6000 बच्चा होना चाहिए। ये राइडर है, ये लोडर है, ये फुलफिलमेंट है। आप यकीन कीजिए, आपकी इस वेबिनार के बाद मेरी जो अमेजोन का सीईओ जो अली बाबा लेकर आए हैं, उन्होंने मेरी क्लास लेनी है, क्योंकि उनको ये बात समझ नहीं आ रही कि एक थर्ड वर्ल्ड कंट्री जहाँ लोग भूखे मर रहे हैं, वहां पे अगले दिन बंदा नौकरी पे क्यों नहीं आता। हमारे बच्चों में एम्बिशन नहीं है। वी आर लुकिंग फॉर अ इजी वे आउट। हमारे पास रोल मॉडल्स नहीं है जो खड़े होकर ये कहें कि मैंने रिसेप्शनिस्ट के तौर पे काम किया था और आज देखो मैं जीएम बन गया क्योंकि मैंने 18 साल काम किया। For shortcuts. Responsibility lies with us as parents, as leaders, as decision makers in our own way. We are not passing on the right message. ये अब ई कॉमर्स की कहानी शुरू हुई है। जिसके पास 4 पैसे हैं वो दराज के मॉडल को कॉपी कर रहा है। तक मेरे पास 3 क्लाइंट हैं जो दराज को कॉपी कर रहे हैं। भाई आप दराज को कॉपी ना करें, बिकॉज वो आप दराज से कम्पीट ही नहीं कर सकते। बिकम देयर वेंडर, डू दैट। So, as I said earlier, we don't think. ये जो चाइनीज आ रहे हैं ना, ये 5 साल की 10 साल की काम करने नहीं आ रहे, वो 2 जनरेशन की थॉट प्रोसेस लाइन है। If I come to any one of you and you're mashallah all CEOs of your company and I give you a sales pitch, तो मेरी सेल्स पिच में होगा कि मेरे बाएं हाथ पे जोंग है जो मैं तब से कर रही हूँ जब वो आया, अभी लॉन्च नहीं हुआ था। मेरे दाएं हाथ पे अली बाबा है। So I will impress you, but trust me, give me half a chance, I will only work with a local corporate. They will at least have some respect for my experience. Chinese will only use you and they will, and as Kurum Sahab rightly said, कि वो तो पानी तक अपना वहां से लेकर आते हैं। इस्लामाबाद आपके जिना सुपर में एक सुपर मार्केट है, एक खातून टिल पे बैठी हुई है, पूरा फ्लोर उनके पास है, कच्ची पर्ची भी नहीं देती वो। वहां पे आपको माचिस से लेके मुर्गी तक उनकी हर तीसरे दिन चाइना से आती है। सो व्हाट आर वी टॉकिंग अबाउट? वी आर नॉट रेडी।
पर सादिया, हम हर बच्चे को, माशाल्लाह, आई थिंक ऑल ऑफ अस हैव चिल्ड्रन, हम हर बच्चे को समझाते हैं कि बेटे ग्रो अप, और जब 18-19 साल का होता है कहते हैं बेटे ग्रो अप एंड नाउ गो एंड मेक योर ओन लाइफ। कुछ हद तक बाप बेटे को प्रोटेक्ट कर सकता है, बट अदरवाइज नहीं हो सकता। बच्चों को अपनी किस्मत खुद बनानी होती है। इवन बिल गेट्स नोज दैट कि नहीं, तो हम बड़े नहीं होंगे, हम चीन की तरफ ही देखते रहेंगे क्या? हमने कभी बड़े नहीं होना, कभी चीन, कभी अमेरिका, कभी कुछ, कभी कुछ। सो यू माशाल्लाह CEOs of corporates are sitting here. You are the Bill Gates of Pakistan. You are the Steve Jobs of Pakistan. I ask you, why is it that our destiny is not in our own hands and in the hands of China, DFID and US and ये वो? बताइए जी, who will want to take the lead on this? I throw the question openly to everybody. जी बोलिए।
एक थोड़ा सा डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव अगर इसमें ऐड कर सकूं,
जरूर,
क्योंकि ज्यादातर टेक्नोलॉजी ओरिएंटेड वो हो रही है, सो एक हेल्थ केयर का पर्सपेक्टिव इसमें अगर ऐड कर दूं तो जिस तरह सारे पैनलिस्ट ने इसका जिक्र किया कि वी डू हैव शॉर्टेज ऑफ स्किल्ड स्टाफ, तो इसके अंदर एंड दिस होल्ड्स ट्रू वेरी मच इन द हेल्थ केयर इंडस्ट्री एज वेल। आपको डॉक्टर्स बेतहाशा मिल जाएंगे, हर शहर में मिल जाएंगे, हर गांव में मिल जाएंगे। But what makes a good healthcare is not a good doctor, it is the entire system around it, जिसमें paramedics का एक बहुत बड़ा role है। So at Shifa here we realized this early on कि जी ये अगर हम generally इधर उधर देखते रहेंगे तो हमें लोग नहीं मिलेंगे। So what we started off was our own training programs for these technicians, for our nurses, or they don't have to pay anything. They after doing inter, they come in, they study without paying anything. They have guaranteed jobs कि उनको हम कहते हैं कि जी जब आप complete करेंगे, so you will get job here, आप उसको complete करेंगे और फिर आप after a certain period you go to other institutions in the country or even outside the country, and we do have certain success stories. लेकिन इसके अंदर जो एक और बहुत बड़ा वो डिलेमा है हमारे पास, वो अगेन जो जिस तरह से पहले भी जिक्र किया, वो ये था कि एम्प्लॉयबिलिटी इज आल्सो वेरी लेस। आपके पास क्वालिफाइड आदमी तो आ जाएगा, लेकिन उसके वर्क एथिक्स, उसका काम करने का अंदाज, when no one is looking at that person, and all those things that come into play, जहां पर आप क्वालिटी सर्विस डिलीवर करना चाहते हैं, ये सारे क्वेश्चन मार्क आ जाता है। And then this thing is not only associated to a particular industry या a particular organization. ये मेरे ख्याल में ये हमारी सोसाइटी का एक ओवरऑल रिफ्लेक्शन है, because all these organizations, चाहे ये प्राइवेट हैं चाहे गवर्नमेंट है, we are a part of this larger society that we are working in. So मेरे ख्याल में इसको सिर्फ कॉर्पोरेट पर्सपेक्टिव से या गवर्नमेंट पर्सपेक्टिव से या एजुकेशन पर्सपेक्टिव से देखना मुनासिब नहीं होगा, बल्कि एक ओवरऑल जो जिस तरफ हम हमारे वर्क एथिक्स, हमारी सोसाइटी में इंडिविजुअल एथिक्स जिस तरफ जा रहे हैं, they are all reflecting in these organizations.
इरफान साहब, आप माशाल्लाह यू बीन वेरी सक्सेसफुल इन गिविंग अस दिस कोविड मैसेज। जब मैं फ़ोन किसी को करता हूँ तो मुझे मैसेज आ जाता है सब फ़ोन कंपनी से कि जी वो कोविड का टेस्ट कराएं या व्हाटएवर, या फिर माशाल्लाह अब ख़त्म हो गया कोविड, स्कूल्स आ रहे हैं वगैरह। Can you not do anything about our culture? Can't you instill some messages there by telling people कि जी टाइम पे आए? फॉर एग्जाम्पल मुझे लोग कहते हैं कि यहाँ चीनी कंपनी आएंगी, मैं कहता हूँ यहाँ चीनी कंपनी क्यों आएगी? चीनी वर्कर को कहें 9 बजे तो 9 बज के 5 मिनट पे खड़ा होता है, और अगर चीनी वर्कर को कहें सिगरेट नहीं पीना तो वो नहीं पीता। हमारा वर्कर तो आएगा, मेरी खाला मर गई, उसकी खाला ही 50 होती हैं, मर जाती हैं रोज, ठीक है, और ऊपर से सिगरेट ब्रेक्स तो बहुत होनी होती हैं, ठीक है, और लंच ब्रेक भी 2-2 घंटे की होती है, नमाज ब्रेक भी 2-2। तो हाउ डू वी चेंज दिस कल्चर?
जी, तो मेरे ख्याल में देखें इसमें मल्टीपल आपको स्टेप्स करने पड़ेंगे। अवेयरनेस इज वन, एंड ऑब्वियसली अवेयरनेस कुड बी डन थ्रू मुख्तलिफ ज़राए से, बट आई थिंक एक चीज जिसको मैं एम्फसाइज करूंगा कि रोल मॉडल्स, और वो जो मैंने मेंटरशिप की बात की पहले, इस मेंटरशिप इज नॉट जस्ट अबाउट के फंक्शनल स्किल, इट्स आल्सो अबाउट यू नो हाउ व्हाट इज एक्सपेक्टेड आउट ऑफ यू एज अ सिटीजन, एज अ लीडर। और वो हमें थोड़ा सॉफ्ट स्किल्स की तरफ काम करने की जरूरत है शुरू से ही, स्कूल लेवल से भी, घरों में भी, और ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के अंदर भी। एटलीस्ट यू नो मल्टीनेशनल्स के अंदर भी आप थोड़ा सा कल्चर एस्टेब्लिश कर पाते हैं, एंड देन व्हाट वी नीड टू डू इज टू इन्फ्लुएंस दैट अराउंड। So I think the collaboration between industry and academia is one big gap overall. And if we are able to fill that gap, we can address multiple issues, functional side ke upar bhi, and then some of the softer skills as well. Because ethics, values, corporate governance, इन सब एरियाज के अंदर आप देखें बहुत गैप है, और स्पेशली हम एक डिटेरियोरेटिंग एनवायरनमेंट की तरफ जा रहे हैं, इवन इफ यू कंपेयर पाकिस्तान लास्ट डेकेड और लास्ट फ्यू डेकेड्स, which is very worrisome. और उस पे जहाँ पर हम एज कॉर्पोरेट्स एंड कॉर्पोरेट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी के तौर पे काम कर सकते हैं, मीडिया का अपना रोल है, एकेडेमिया का अपना है, और पेरेंट्स, ऑल ऑफ अस, वी नीड टू स्टेप अप. सो अगेन इसमें भी आई थिंक वी नीड अ कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव नेशनल प्लान कि कैसे हम इस लीडरशिप फ्रॉम द टॉप, आई एम श्योर बहुत से लोग अपने अपनी वसात के मुताबिक काम कर रहे हैं इसके ऊपर, बिकॉज वी ऑल सी अ ह्यूज गैप, बट वी नीड टू come together, build that ecosystem जहाँ पर हम एक तो शऊर दे सकें और दूसरा रोल मॉडल्स हों और बता सकें कि there is no shortcuts in life. You have to, I mean,
अच्छा, आपने लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल किया इकोसिस्टम का, बड़ा अच्छा लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल किया। दूसरी, you made a very good observation कि इंडस्ट्री यूनिवर्सिटी कोलैबोरेशन, but I find it a little bizarre कि आप लोग माशाल्लाह saying कि इंडस्ट्री और यूनिवर्सिटी कोलैबोरेशन होती नहीं। यू आर द पीपल विद मनी। यूनिवर्सिटी तो बेचारी भूखी बैठी हुई रो रही है, उनके पास पैसा ही कोई नहीं है। ये तो मेरे पास मैंने अभी ये मैगजीन छापा है अभी, ठीक है, पीआईडी की तरफ से ये मैगजीन छापा है, ठीक है जी। और इसको बनाने के लिए मैंने बड़े कॉर्पोरेट्स को फोन किया, अपने दोस्तों को सारों को, कि यार आई वोंट नेम देम, बड़े बड़े लोग हैं, कि जी पैसे दे दे। किसी ने भी नहीं दिए। फाइनली बीकन हाउस ने हमें पैसे दिए इस मैगजीन को छापने के लिए। वो इतने पैसे कौन से को खास थे, मतलब ये टॉकिंग अबाउट 2.5 लाख रुपया दिया है। तो आई मीन यू नो, हे बेचारी यूनिवर्सिटी तो भूखी बैठी है, बट द कॉर्पोरेट्स आर नॉट विलिंग टू डू दिस। तो ये क्या वजह, ये भी बताइए ना हमें। ये सब कहते हैं इंडस्ट्री कॉर्पोरेशन। होनी चाहिए, पर होती क्यों नहीं?
नहीं, मेरे ख्याल में ज़ाहिर है बहुत बेहतर हो सकती है, बट हम जैसे मैंने कहा कि अगेन अपने अपने अगर मैं अपनी कंपनी का जिक्र करूं तो भी रिसेंटली लास्ट मंथ के अंदर हमने एक बड़ा एक इनिशिएटिव इस्लामाबाद की एक यूनिवर्सिटी के साथ लिया, जहां पर हम 1000 के करीब बच्चों को सर्विस डिजाइन की ट्रेनिंग दे रहे हैं। अभी इन नेक्स्ट वीक पेशावर के अंदर खैबर पख्तूनख्वा आईटी बोर्ड एंड उसके साथ वी आर running a series of workshops funded by us through other partners as well, जिसमें हम ये skill sets के ऊपर बात कर रहे हैं, and then we launching a program. So we are doing quite a few number of those. I mean, again, question ये है कि ज़रूरत बहुत ज़्यादा की है, यहाँ पर demand काफी है, and then we see कि request बहुत आते हैं, तो we need to be also, you know, focus के कितना हम इसके ऊपर कर सकते हैं. But again, bigger question is also, जैसे बाहर भी होता है, आप बेहतर जानते हैं कि यूनिवर्सिटीज नीड टू आल्सो सी कि सस्टेनेबल रिसोर्सेज कैसे जनरेट करें, टू कीप ऑन वर्किंग ऑन दोज एरियाज. बट आई आल्सो एक्नॉलेज कि हमारे यहाँ जनरल बिजनेसेस शुड बी स्पेंडिंग मोर टाइम रिसर्च के अंदर, कोलैबोरेशन के अंदर, एंड देयर इज अ ह्यूज रूम एक्चुअली फॉर ऑल ऑफ अस टू वर्क टुगेदर इवन मोर क्लोजली. नो डाउट.
Right. QG, anybody else wants to take up this question about industry?
I think I'd like to add something to it. So I think there are two things. So one thing, there are structural collaborations that we do for research in our own value systems. The other part of this is, I think not many people are familiar, and I keep on raising this time and again. We are one of the few industries that does contribute 0.5% of our revenue to R&D, which is a public fund available across the board. So I'm not saying that we cannot do more, but I'm saying the point is, while we all collaborate, like Irfan suggested, we have a couple of examples, the UAT Ptcl and some startups that we work with. But I think the other thing is, yes, so one thing is, the corporates need to enable people to come and work on their platforms and create local capacity. I think that people are doing more or less in one form or the other. The other part of that is that if I were to tell you, I would say there is a company by the name of USF R&D Fund, which is funded by the telcos primarily for the purpose that you just eliminate. So I think, again, so my discussion is that needs to be structured as well. So there is a lot of contribution that does go as an obligation for R&D. So what happens is कि जो out of the ecosystem R&Ds होती हैं, they sort of get limited because everybody's working with a kitty and a budget. So I would just like to bring that point. For PITE, for example, I think you should tap into, if you're doing a digital growth or that kind of a study, that could be an avenue where a significant amount of funding should be, and they do public funding as well. So they did work with startups, they did work with telcos. I think that's one avenue that I would like to sort of bring to the table.
Every industry gives such a, there's an export development fund, there's a pharmaceutical fund, there's a cotton cess. Every industry.
Let's use that better. Let's use
but
that better.
All that goes to the finance ministry. None of it is used for research. But leave that as it is. Let me ask you a very simple question. Given this thing, very simple question. You're a public limited company, Ptcl, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is no secret. What is the market cap of Ptcl?
Yeah.
Public limited company has to be public information.
$700 million, $800 million, yes. Depending on
$700 million. I thought we sold the company for $2 billion. I mean, a small share, not a large share. But it's still $700-800 million. Now, let me ask you a simple question. Irfan Sahab, aapki company, the private, I can't ask you this question. A telecom company, let's say in Dubai or somewhere, is worth billions of dollars. Why is the market cap so low of your companies? I was surprised. I'm doing a paper just now and I'm going to print it soon. I was doing a paper on the stock market. I'm still doing it. I mean, it should be out soon. A paper on the stock market, I've kind of lost my zest on doing this because I was really dismayed to find that our private sector is very weak in Pakistan. The largest company in Pakistan is Engro, private company. And Engro's market cap is $1.something billion. So if you think about it in the international scheme of things, you are very small players. And my question to you guys is, why are you small players? Why can't you grow? Because if you grow, the country will grow too. QG, anybody can take this question.
No. So I'll take that. So if you're talking particularly telecoms, the telecoms are currently in a capex intensity is very high. So that's why you see the multiples are not as high. So if you look at the total global telecom growth is actually around 1 to 2% in terms of the revenues, but the intensity the capital required to sustain all the bandwidth growths and acquire the spectrums is averaging around 12 to 15%. So that's why you see the multiples at this particular point in time, because they're going into a heavy investment phase to support the data growth. That's from the second part of this is we are part of the same economy. So if you are again shrinking as a country or shrinking in terms of the growth rates, that will be reflected in the valuation of all the companies. Nobody's out of that league. So to do that, again, it needs to be, it is a long debate, but I think for me, it is the economy that needs to grow, that drives everything else. And for that, I already alluded earlier, I spent a lot of time explaining what I think are two fundamentals that need to come into place.
But let me come back on that. I mean, again, think about it. Kareem, which is like a nothing company, sold for $3 billion. So I put the question to all of you, Khurram Saab, apna, whoever, Taimur Saab, whoever, why is it that our companies are so small? Why is it, Irfan Saab, our companies are so small? Please tell me. Anybody?
Quick example, Doji, I mean, again, from Pakistan, and we need to have a lot more examples, so don't take me wrong. Easy Paisa ka aapne pehle zikr kiya, it's a Telenor bank, which is sort of the Easy Paisa's brand. We got a valuation, or abhi humne ko 1.5 saal pehle, $410 million ki valuation when we sold 45% of the stake. So, and that all started as a startup. Small microfinance bank, which we took over about 11 years ago, 2009, or which was valued at over $400 million post money. So again, we have few examples, and then we have seen that in our space, in our own group. But considering our market size, I think there's a huge potential. Valuation ke point of view, you're right. Again, isliye I'm emphasizing on new economy. I'm emphasizing on knowledge economy and digitization, because that's the only play which can give us that sort of investment as well as valuations, because fundamentally it's our market size that is quite conducive. So I think.
I mean, we've got 220 million people, and yet our companies are not growing so rapidly. I would expect that we should have at least, $100 billion companies in this country, maybe more. And we have only about $2 or $3 billion companies in the country. And unfortunately, those are mostly government owned. If you take out the government, there are very few billion-dollar companies. PSO, OGDC, वगैरह को अगर आप निकाल दें, तो we've hardly got a billion-dollar company. In fact, the surprising thing was the biggest company was Pakistan Tobacco, which is a strange company which is larger than other companies. So anyways, this is a question I leave open to everybody. Please go ahead, folks. Anybody wants to answer this? क्यों जी? तैमूर साहब आप कुछ कहेंगे या खुरम साहब कहेंगे कुछ?
मतलब इसके अंदर जो अगर मैं हेल्थ केयर की भी बात करूं तो I would second what Mukim साहब said. We are part of the economy. So इसलिए it's also important कि जी अगर मुल्क की इकोनॉमी ग्रो कर रही है तो we always say कि जी दुनिया की 5वीं बड़ी आबादी है. So as far as the potential is concerned is immense. लेकिन लोगों की पेइंग कैपेसिटी how in terms of growth चीजें जिस तरफ जा रही हैं, these things matter a lot. हेल्थ केयर स्पेसिफिक अगर मैं बात करूं उसके अंदर जिस तरह एक चीज का जिक्र मुकीम साहब ने भी किया that you have 41 approvals to get right of way. Similar kind of hurdles exist in healthcare as well. जबकि अगर मैं overall growth pattern की बात करूं तो there is so much opportunity, unfortunately, and I would say unfortunately, because government जो healthcare provision का जो काम है उस तरीके से नहीं कर पा रही. 70% of our people are actually going to private healthcare providers, clinics में बाकी जगहों के ऊपर. तो एक फैक्टर तो इसके अंदर ये वाला आता है. दूसरा फैक्टर जो कि हेल्थ केयर में ही अगर मैं बात करूं इज द इमेंस कैपेक्स जिसका इरफान साहब ने भी जिक्र किया टेलीकॉम पर्सपेक्टिव से. एक कैंसर की मशीन खरीदने के लिए अच्छे खासे पैसे किसी एक अस्पताल को निकाल के लगाने पड़ते हैं. वी हैव टू प्लान फॉर इयर्स बिफोर दैट हैपेंस, एंड देन उसके बाद उसकी एक ऑनगोइंग सपोर्ट, उसकी बाकी सारी चीजें. तो बहुत सारे लोग they don't even venture going into that. तो अगर थोड़ा सा एनवायरनमेंट कंड्यूसिव हो जाए, थोड़ा सा गवर्नमेंट की पॉलिसी टुवर्ड्स मेकिंग अ पर्टिकुलर सेक्टर अ सक्सेस, उसके ऊपर काम करना शुरू हो जाए, तो the opportunities are there, but yes, so are the roadblocks. So मेरे ख्याल में with times to come in, we will have more number of companies such.
तैमूर साहब,
एक चीज
एक सेकंड में इनसे एक चीज पूछ लूं. तैमूर साहब, 20 years ago I was in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka had a very big hospital called Apollo, which is an Indian hospital, and that Apollo spread out in many countries. What is, हम लोग क्यों नहीं किए? Why is Shifa not in 10 countries?
We are next year inshallah, अगर हुआ तो we would be 3. So इसलिए वो थोड़े से ज़्यादा हो जाएंगे. But yes, उसके अंदर they expanded significantly. अगरचे, by the way, I visited Sri Lanka a few years ago. वो वाला Apollo बंद हो गया. So it's now a local one. But yes, I agree. They have this healthcare group that expands into Middle East. It expands inside India. So again, जिस तरह मैंने आपसे जिक्र किया कि अगर कोई environment conducive हो, there are funds, global funds that are investing into healthcare entities in Pakistan because they realize कि जी gap बहुत ज़्यादा है. लेकिन once they come in, इस regulatory environment के अंदर navigate करना, so again, don't take it as a normal complaining कि जी हर दफा हम रोते हैं कि जी हुकूमत ये नहीं करती, हुकूमत वो नहीं करती. But knowing 2 to 3 big players healthcare के अंदर ही जो इस मुल्क में काम कर रहे हैं, as part of their risk management plan, the topmost risk that they have and we have is the regulatory environment that you're working in. We never know कि जी कल को क्या हो जाए और किस तरीके से आगे हो, तो इन्वेस्टर भी देख के ही पैसे उस तरीके से लगाते हैं. So there are factors और इंशाल्लाह, but we are hopeful. Inshallah, with times to come, we can grow.
I'd like to add something, Nadeem Saab, if I may. Okay, you have to keep the policy framework in perspective. When you talk about the GDP per capita and you look at the country, I mean, what you see is not a representative number. What you are seeing is a part of the economy which is documented. You talk about a certain element of productivity per capita, but we all know that the reality is that the productivity per capita is much, much higher. There is, what is the percentage of penetration of banking accounts in the country? You're talking about 20, 30%. That means that 60, 70% of your country is not formally in the sector. You talk about the number of taxpayers. You know, आप सिर्फ ये बता दें कि हमारी stock exchange में retail user कितना है, corporate users तो ठीक हैं. तो आप बात कर रहे हैं एक framework की जो exist ही नहीं करता कि जो conducive ho formally documenting all that economic activity that's coming in the market. The economic activity from a milk perspective is not what is sold by a few documented people who sell cartons of milk. There's a huge economy which is basically beyond and above what you see. So I think the point is investment is a function of a policy framework where you bring in that informal economy into the system. And I think there are some efforts being done. I mean, just look at the remittances. The remittances have gone up, not because you're exporting more labor and more qualified staff abroad, but because efforts has been made to bring in people into the formal economy. And you see remittances growing. So I think this is a policy framework question. I think there is the intent is there, execution में थोड़ा lag है, और इंशाल्लाह अल्लाह ने चाहा तो बेहतर हो जाएगा. But I think the economics of the country, given the size of the population, the vibrancy of the informal sector, बड़ा कुछ काम है. यहाँ पाकिस्तान में आप देखेंगे जब ये construction की activity होगी, not all of that will be documented, but आएगा. इसकी एक accelerator principle के basis पे impact आएगा economy में. And that's my contribution.
Good, good. Khurram Sahab, you were saying something?
जी, मैं एक पॉइंट की तरफ और इशारा करना चाह रहा था कि हमारे पास एक इजी इनकम का सोर्स रहा है, अभी भी है, एंड दैट इज प्रॉपर्टी. उसने बहुत स्कू किया जब एक इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट दूसरे अपने कुली की तरफ देखता है जो 2 बजे उठता है एंड ही मेक्स मच मोर मनी, तो वो जो इंसेंटिव है टू इंडस्ट्रियलाइज फर्दर and tackling all those 29 departments which knock at your door day in and day out, तो वो diversion हो जाती है. So property has been,
sorry, go ahead.
जी मैंने कहा property has been a very easy income, uncontrolled, और उसका बहुत impact है हमारी industrialization और investment ना होने पे.
ठीक है जी. खुरम साहब, मेरा ख्याल है कुछ थोड़ी सी मिथ्स हमारे मुल्क में हैं जो रिसर्च क्लैरिफाई करनी चाहिए और हमने की हैं, अनफॉर्चुनेटली बात ज़्यादा निकलती नहीं. एक तो हमने रिसर्च किया प्रॉपर्टी में रिटर्न उतने नहीं जितना स्टॉक मार्केट में है. ओवर टाइम प्रॉपर्टी हैज़ अ लोअर रिटर्न देन द स्टॉक मार्केट. दूसरी चीज़ आप खुद ही देख लें, गौहर एजाज 20 साल से बैठा हुआ है लेक सिटी पे, ही स्टिल ट्राइंग टू फिगर इट आउट. ठीक है, इट प्रॉपर्टी इज अ वेरी वेरी लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट एंड इट डजंट वर्क. एंड यस, मलिक रियाज टाइप बनता है, एक आधा बना लेता है. एंड ऑल ऑफ अस, मैं कई दोस्तों से चेक किया जिनके पास प्लॉट्स होते हैं, उनसे मैं पूछता हूँ उनका प्लॉट जनाब बिकते बिकते 10 साल लग जाते हैं. तो क्वाइट फ्रैंकली इट्स अ वेरी इलिक्विड, वेरी डिफिकल्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट. यस, डीएचए में कई जगह अगर आपकी किस्मत खुल जाए तो बड़ी अच्छी हो जाती है, बट डीएचए में भी फेज 9 की फाइलें लेके बैठे हो 10 की बड़े सालों से. सो दैट्स बिसाइड. दूसरी चीज डॉक्यूमेंटेशन का भी बड़ा मसला है कि डॉक्यूमेंटेशन पे हम लगे रहते हैं, बट क्वाइट फ्रैंकली व्हेन आई लुक बैक एट द रॉबर बैरन्स, जिसमें मेरा बड़ा इंटरेस्ट है, मैं पढ़ता रहता हूँ रॉकफेलर वगैरह, कार्नेगी वगैरह, वो जो लोग हैं उन्होंने तो कोई वेट नहीं किया था पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क के लिए, उन्होंने धड़ल्ले से ठा करके चीजें बनाई. ठीक है, तो हमारे वो कहाँ हैं? तो खुरम साहब, मैं आपसे एक चीज पूछना चाहता हूँ कि ये टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री जो है, आप माशाल्लाह यू बीन अ प्रोमिनेंट फैमिली इन दिस फॉर 60-70 इयर्स नाउ, मुझे एक छोटी सी बात बताएं कि ये व्हाई डू वी हैव 20,000 textile mills? I'm exaggerating, but not by much, because there's a large number of small textile players who are insolvent. अच्छा, बाकी दुनिया में देख रहे हैं, ऑटोमोबाइल्स ले लें, इंटरनेट ले लें, कोई चीजें ले लें, गूगल के साथ 10-15 सर्च इंजन थे, गूगल रह गया. ठीक है, इसी तरह माइक्रोसॉफ्ट, एप्पल 10,000 वो थे, डेल शेल वो कम हो गए हैं. ठीक है, why don't you guys consolidate? Why aren't you guys efficient, buy out some of the inefficient plants? Why don't I just go interested there?
नेचुरल कंसोलिडेशन हो रही है जी. पीपल जो बहुत सी छोटी कंपनीज हैं, दे डाइंग ऑफ, और जो कंपनीज स्टेबल काम कर रही है, दे ग्रोइंग. सो क्योंकि ओवरऑल ग्रोथ नजर नहीं आ रही सेक्टर में, मगर इंडिविजुअल कंपनीज आर ग्रोइंग एट ए मच फास्टर स्पीड. तो ये ट्रेंड अगले 3-4 साल में आपको क्लियर हो जाएगा.
So Sadia, do you see a market for talent developing in this country, or is PID right? We put out a paper recently that Pakistan is a talent repellent country. Which way do you go? Is Pakistan talent repellent or is it talent attractive?
It's talent repellent.
Okay, and our corporate sector is still talent repellent?
Interestingly, Irfan, I don't recall if Irfan Wahab Saab was there. When Telenor came to Pakistan, they had a model where whichever country they went to, for a hiring process, they would hire an independent consultant. I just happened to be that consultant. So I learned a lot. And we are going back so many years, and they'll tell you how we think. Their model was they'll advertise, we'll do the shortlisting, and there'll be a big hall in all cities, and everybody will be invited. They'll give a test, and then they will clear the test, and then we'll invite them again for interviews. And they had done Bangladesh, they had done similar countries. And when they asked for our expert opinion, we said, you know what, in Pakistan, people, manager and above will not come, will not give tests, and will not be part of this. They felt it was odd. Why I'm telling you this story? Because this then happened. Senior people did not come. They did not appear for the test. They felt हमें टेस्ट देने की क्या जरूरत है, टेलीनॉर का दिल करता है तो कर ले. ये हमारी एक प्रवेल करता है माइंडसेट. हम एक सर्टेन लेवल पे आके समझते हैं हमें सब कुछ आता है. तो जब कोई नया इंसान नई चीज आती है ना, वी आर नॉट रेडी फॉर इट, वी आर नॉट रेडी टू अनलर्न. पेंडेमिक ने तो हमारे साथ हैंड कर दिया कि हमें अनलर्न करना पड़ रहा है. उसके बावजूद मैं परसों एक डिप्टी सीईओ से मिली, उन्होंने फखर से कहा एक दिन छुट्टी नहीं की, रोज दफ्तर आता था. और मेरा दिल किया कि अपने साथ जुल्म कर रहे थे तो बाकियों के साथ क्यों किया. So, we repel in just not talent in a lot of ways. It's like what I'm trying to say that it's, wheels within wheels within wheels. I have somebody, I'm not at liberty to name him. He's part of NEOM, Saudi Arab's king's dream. He's on the executive committee. He is so talented. He wants to come back. He has come back. He was committed a role. I met him 5 months after him being appointed. He said, Sadia, I'm going back. I said, what happened? You took 85% salary cut. You left NEOM to come back to Pakistan. He said, yes, I did all that, but whatever I was committed is not happening. I have a family. There's only so much I can do. So it's happening. And right now we have 1.5 million people coming back from Saudi Arab alone. They are all not taxi drivers, they are not mazdoors, they are manager and above. Are we ready for them? No, we are not. We will use this opportunity. अब तो इतने लोग आ रहे हैं तो सैलरियां कम कर लो, इस वक्त तो हमारी मार्केट है. That's a standard thing that I get to hear. I just closed a position yesterday where 5 global CEOs were completely aligned with the proposed salary that we proposed. But the local CEO said, come offer kijiye. I said, but we agreed, the candidate knows. He said, no, try kar le. You know, after going through a two-month process, having a exceptionally talented candidate, my Pakistani CEO is saying, try kar le. And I have 5 global CEOs who are saying, no, we agreed on this. So do you see where we are coming from?
Okay, so in closing, let me pose one question, last question to you guys. And you guys can sum up however you like. It's your show, you are the stars. Can you please tell me, forget the government, what would you, take yourself out of your current role and just simply act as an advisor, what would you advise corporate CEOs as consultants? Okay, how should they do things differently? 1 or 2 or 3 things that they should do differently in the post-COVID era for companies to grow, because I'm a strong believer Pakistan will grow only if the companies grow. So how should our corporate governance change? I'll tell you another thing which our paper has done. We've also looked at your boards, by the way. We've also looked at the corporate boards. And it's interesting that KSC 100 has 700 people on the board or 800 and is owned by 13 or 30 families, something like that. So we are not far off from Mahbubul Haq's 22 families. We are still in the same era. So that's just an aside. But just tell me, what would you advise as consultants, how corporate governance should change in Pakistan in the post-COVID era? So who would like to go first?
I will go.
Go ahead, Ji.
I think so. Coming back to, I think we've discussed a wide range of topics. So coming back to the COVID, how do we take the companies forward? I think there are 3 things that companies will need to look at. I think the biggest thing that is what I find missing is that we're trying to compare the on-site experience with the off-site experience. So all the time, so that transition, the culture that needs to evolve over there, I think that's the first focus. So I think you need to look at your employees' digital experience and how do you benchmark. So you just need to give a grid. I think what I see is a lot of intent to manage the employees as if they are on site. So there's a concept of digital wellness, for example. So I think in my view, the first part of that is in the COVID world, what is your strategy from a culture perspective? I think that's the biggest thing. Technology as an enabler will become available. If it's not available, people will be able to access. Technology to me is not the limiting factor. It's an enabler that can be multiplied as a resource. But I think it's the people aspect. The second part of this, I think that people generally don't take for granted is your resilience, your agility. It's my supply chain has been impacted. My collection methodologies are evolving. So I think the 2 things that need to come in is, so are my people, and how do I take my people along in this transition? I think that to me is a fundamental boardroom discussion. So we've gone through the change. Now we're trying to figure out how do we control the people within this grid. So I think because I think the one question that I actually am reprimanding my own team is, if you sit in a meeting today and ask, are you working from home? So I think that kind of a mindset change. So first we need to realize the enablement, then we need to make sure that we need to differentiate between the on-site and off-site experience. I think we'll all learn together. I think that's the transition that we need to do.
Great point. Great point. G.
I'll come next.
Go ahead.
The classical job description silo model needs to be converted more into roles. Secondly, we need to empower the workforce by training them for trade-offs, because there are very quick trade-offs COVID has taught us. Thirdly, the spirit of entrepreneurship in an organization, more empowerment, more entrepreneurship, less structural things.
Okay, good. Who else? Ji? Taimur Saab?
जी, नहीं, I would second Khurram साहब, मैं भी इसी point को वो करना चाह रहा था कि I think for the future companies की अगर हम बात करें तो जितनी empowerment लोगों के पास होगी to make quick decisions. COVID ने at least जो एक चीज सिखाई वो ये सिखाई कि you have to be on your toes, you have to make decision and implement them the next morning. तो जिन कंपनीज के अंदर ये agility थी, ये empowerment लोगों के अंदर थी, they were able to do that. लेकिन अगर को वो नाम के गवर्नेंस है और कंट्रोल उसको एक आदमी ने ही करना है, उसी की सर अगर यूं हिलता है तो एक तरह का फैसला होता है, दूसरी तरफ हिलता है तो दूसरी तरह का, those are the rigid structures. So मेरे ख्याल में अगर हम गवर्नेंस और ओवरऑल उसके हिसाब से बात करें, so more empowerment and with more empowerment मेरे ख्याल में जितने लोग जिसका सादिया ने भी जिक्र किया कि जितना टैलेंट बाहर से अगर आ रहा है, they would find themselves at home, they would find themselves to be able to make difference. मेरे ख्याल में बहुत सारे मुझे हर एक का नहीं पता, लेकिन बहुत सारे एग्जीक्यूटिव्स जो कि कंपनीज में अच्छे पोजीशन पर हैं, they once used to work outside, but there were those who were lucky who came in who thought that we can make a difference working within an organization. उन organizations ने उनको मौका भी दिया and they are doing good. So मेरे ख्याल में empowerment is the key अगर कोई advice दी जाए.
Great. जी, सादिया बेबी. जी, go ahead.
Well, empowerment, yes. One thing as a corporate governance we really need to look at is the mental health right now. People are dealing with this work out of home, pandemic, in very different ways. Even now that, and I'm sure Taimur can second that, when the numbers are decreasing, I see a lot of anxiety, post-anxiety. People don't know how to manage now going partially back home, back to work. Corporates need to very seriously look at, not only because of pandemic and more so at the leadership, is mentor and coaching that we don't have, and right now more than before.
Great. Ji, कौन रह गया जी?
I can go. So,
sorry, Irfan.
The two perspectives I like to give. एक तो
go ahead. Go ahead. जी,
two perspectives I like to share here. एक तो internally अगर look at towards my own organization. So I just want to build on the empowerment theme. So what we have, the new term which we are coined is tight, loose, tight. That means that you should be very tight in terms of your objectives and goal, very clear, but loose when it comes to how to achieve it. Especially empowering, that empowerment जो सब बात कर रहे हैं कि employees को कैसे हमने वो flexibility देनी है to figure out, to explore, to experiment, and then you follow up again tightly in terms of are we making progress. एक बात जो externally I want to say is कि आज भी जो चीज काफी clear हुई panel पे भी, we all talk about a lot of challenges, और इसमें कोई शक नहीं है कि there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of roadblocks, but as leaders what we need to also talk about is to give hope to our youth, to everyone who's there, चाहे वो लोग बाहर से आना चाह रहे हैं वापस या and in COVID ने एक चीज जो काफी clear की है वो कि जो opportunities आज exist करती हैं वो opportunities शायद आज से पहले नहीं थी, and we need to really build on that. We need to build on those foundations. और especially large part of our society is our females, and then unless we bring those females into the mainstream through technology and now actually working from home or specific opportunities जो हैं, we need to really focus on that and make sure that 50% of the population is not left out.
Great, wonderful. Ji.
So I'll basically say two things that COVID taught us. One was essentially communicate, and then loosen the command and control structures. So let people innovate, let people feel that they can make decisions, obviously within certain frameworks, But working from home, working remotely, managing your customers, historically, it's always been a command control led set. Upar se boss batata hai ki dusre ne kya karna hai. But when you're working remotely and you are able to communicate, these are a broad cultural values that we have assigned to. This is the customer satisfaction that we need. We found that in our case, the team rose to the occasion. And we came up with a lot of initiatives ranging from paying our suppliers upfront because they were going through cash flow issues to basically managing our customers better. And that's how you have to be a little bit more agile and learn to evolve with the market. And that was our experience, and which we're trying to kind of institutionalize going forward.
Fascinating discussion, folks. So I think it's time to close. We are almost more than 1 o'clock now. Irfan Saab, do you have any last words since you initiated and you are the co-sponsor of the seminar? Any last words, Irfan Saab?
I just want to repeat again, we need to sort of leave at a positive note. And that is all about how we build that ecosystem together. I think we all have a collective responsibility, regardless of our roles, to come together as the thought leaders and show that leadership which is required, because entire youth population is looking towards us to show and guide them. I think we have a huge responsibility and we should not disappoint them.
Fair point. Very good. Excellent. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much. This has been a great discussion. I've really learned a lot. I think there are a number of issues that we need to think about. I'm not going to try and summarize the discussion. We will summarize the discussion and print our summary, as we always do. But I think, quite frankly, I'm so happy that corporate leaders like yourself, Irfan Saab, Mukim Saab, Taimur Saab, everybody have come out. I'm so happy that you participated in this. Lots of children now will pick up, lots of our students will pick up their theses and start working on things that you've said. This is the kind of collaboration that we need, and we are very happy to have this collaboration. And this collaboration is what will give students hope that, hey, CEOs are talking to them. I've often said to people that when a CEO of Glaxo or whatever, let's say British Rail or, even Microsoft gets an invitation by a university to give a talk there, they are very, very open and very, very happy, in fact, to go and give a talk there. As you can see, their commencement addresses are on YouTube, and they even dress up funnily and do all kinds of things to address students. In our country, we are trying to build this tradition and build hope for students, because they should see you people, the middle-class students who never have a chance of seeing you, they should see you people as hope, that you're thinking about them, you are actually doing something for the country. So I think we can build a better society doing this. This is our hope and this is our dream. And inshallah, we will carry your messages and try and amplify them as much as we can. We look forward to further collaborations with you people. Thank you all. I don't want to take up much of your time. You've been very, very generous with your time. We thank you profusely from the bottom of our heart, and we will inshallah carry on our collaboration further. Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.